Not every weapon gleamed in the sun. Some whispered in ink. You are a vizier of the Ottoman court. The palace is hushed tonight, heavy with the weight of unspoken rivalries. A candle flickers on your desk, its flame bending in the draught from the lattice window. And then soft footsteps. A servant places a sealed parchment before you. The wax glints crimson in the dim light. You recognize the hand immediately. Hürrem Sultan. Your chest tightens. This is no ordinary letter to be logged in archives or filed among decrees. This one is meant for your eyes and only your eyes. You know that breaking the seal ties your fate to hers. Yet your hand trembles forward, because you cannot not open it. The world remembers Hürrem Sultan's love letters to Suleiman verses, dripping with devotion. Each word a chain around the Sultan's heart. But few recall the other letters. The ones not addressed to her beloved, but to the men who circled the throne. Letters that shifted from the language of passion to the language of power. For Suleiman she wrote as lover, confidant, wife. For youth of vizier she writes as strategist. And this shift was no accident. It was her quietest and deadliest revolution. Why does your pulse quicken when you hold her letter? Because secrecy is intoxicating. To be singled out for hidden knowledge is to feel both chosen and endangered. In a court where public decrees roared like cannons, Hurrem's letters whispered like silk, softer, subtler, but impossible to ignore. Every sealed page was a test. If she wrote to you, it meant you mattered. If she didn't, perhaps you were already forgotten, or worse, dismissed. This tension was addictive. Men found themselves waiting, sleepless, for the next letter. Not because they enjoyed the words, but because silence was unbearable. Hurrem understood that a sultan's love could bind one man, but letters could bind an empire. When she first began, her writing flowed only toward Suleiman, playful, intimate, dripping with imagery of longing. Yet gradually, another current formed. She began writing to viziers, suggesting policy with the softness of advice, yet carrying the sharp edge of expectation. She wrote to governors, framing her words as reminders of the sultans, although all knew the message came from her. She even reached foreign rulers, slipping her presence across borders in ink where armies could not march. Each letter was a door left slightly ajar. Was it an invitation, a warning, or a trap? Only by stepping through could you know, and by then, it was too late. So here you sit, candlelight shaking, eyes fixed on Hurrem's seal. You are about to open not just a letter, but a labyrinth. Once you read, you can never unread. Once you answer, you can never step back. This is how Hurrem transformed writing into a weapon, sharper than any janissary blade. She made secrecy addictive, every letter a whisper of power, every silence a punishment. In a palace of endless voices, one scarce letter became priceless. The Ottoman court was never silent. Pages hurried down marble corridors, viziers argued in hushed tones, eunuchs carried whispers from one pavilion to another. The palace breathed in secrets and exhaled rumors. Yet in this endless storm of voices, one thing was painfully rare, a letter from Hürrem Sultan. And because it was rare, it became irresistible. Hürrem understood the oldest rule of human desire. We crave what we cannot easily have. Unlike Suleiman's endless decrees, her letters arrived sparingly, sometimes weeks apart, sometimes months. She never flooded the court with her handwriting. She allowed it to vanish, to grow scarce. And then, just when anticipation turned to restlessness, it would appear. A folded parchment, a wax seal, her unmistakable hand. This was her brilliance. By withholding letters, she made each one feel like a rare jewel. To receive a message was to feel chosen, elevated above the crowd. Viziers would study the curves of her script as if it contained omens. Governors would boast quietly, "She has written to me." And those who received nothing, they were consumed by dread. The palace became addicted to her silence. Waiting itself became a form of torture. Men obsessed over when the next letter would come, what it might contain, and most importantly whether it would come to them at all. Imagine the divan, the council chamber of empire. A vizier walks in with a folded parchment tucked into his robe. He does not speak of it, but everyone sees. Every pair of eyes follows. Conversations falter. No one asks, but all of them are asking silently. Why him? What does it say? What does it mean for me? By sending one scarce letter, Hürrem set 1,000 rumors loose. Each rumor spread faster than the ink itself, mutating, growing, multiplying. Men argued not about what the Sultan decreed, but about what Hürrem might have written. This is the same trap our brains fall into today. A constant stream of messages loses its power, but a rare one, unpredictable, scarce, becomes magnetic. We lean forward, refreshing, waiting. Anticipation is stronger than certainty. It's not the content itself, but the gap, the silence, that keeps us hooked. Hurrem mastered this centuries before anyone spoke of dopamine or variable rewards. So remember the vizier staring at his sealed parchment, feeling both blessed and cursed. One letter in his pocket, 1,000 rumors at his back. Hurrem didn't need to shout. She didn't need to speak at all. She understood that scarcity made her ink more precious than gold, and the court, restless and sleepless, could never get enough of what she withheld. Intrigue needs spectators, even if they're unwilling. Picture the council chamber of Topkapi Palace. A vizier enters, his robe heavy with embroidered silk, but at Isanti his clothing. The others notice it, the folded parchment peeking from his sleeve. He doesn't announce it. He doesn't wave it in the air. He simply lets it be seen. And that is enough. Every gaze sharpens, every conversation stumbles, because the court knows a letter has arrived, and it is not from the Sultan. It is from Hurrem. Hurrem understood that letters were never just private exchanges. They were performances, and the audience was the court itself. When a vizier received her writing, the real power wasn't only in the words sealed inside. It was in the spectacle of everyone else noticing. The mere circulation of her letters created theater. Who received one, who didn't, whose hand lingered too long on the seal, whose face tightened as they realized they'd been excluded. The drama played out not in ink, but in the glances and whispers that followed. Rumor became her stagecraft. One letter could multiply into a dozen stories by nightfall. A simple suggestion in ink transformed into whispers of alliances, threats, or plots. And the more people talked, the more impossible it became to separate fact from theater. Hurrem never had to shout commands. She simply sent one message into the bloodstream of the palace, and gossip did the rest faster, louder, and with far more dramatic effect than any decree. Why did this work? Because humans are wired to look sideways. If others react, we feel compelled to react too. In the court, if your rival appeared shaken after reading her letter, you had no choice but to be shaken as well. If others treated her words like destiny, you could not afford to dismiss them. This is the addiction lever of social proof. In Hurrem's world, the letter mattered not just because of what it said, but because everyone else treated it like treasure or poison. And in that pressure, men lost the ability to act freely. They became spectators and performers at the same time, forced to show they had noticed, forced to join the play. So imagine again that folded parchment, slipping from his sleeve into sight. The vizier doesn't read it aloud. He doesn't need to. The audience, the court, is already watching, already interpreting, already in sprint. Hurrem turned the palace into a theater, her letters into props, and the most powerful men of the empire into unwilling actors. In the empire of whispers, performance was survival, and no one could look away. Every word meant one thing on the page, and another between the lines. The candle burns low as you hold Hurrem's letter in your hand. At first glance, it seems soft, almost affectionate, an elegant reminder of loyalty, wrapped in graceful phrases. Yet as your eyes linger, you sense something else, a warning, faint but sharp, hiding just beneath the ink. Is this reassurance, or is it a threat? You cannot tell, and that uncertainty keeps you reading again and again, as if the parchment might reveal its secrets on the 10th attempt. This was Hurrem's greatest craft, writing with two voices at once. The first was gentle, offering encouragement, perhaps even gratitude. The second, silent but unmistakable, carried caution, promise, or demand. She could blend affection with command so seamlessly that a recipient could never be sure which side of her they had awakened. A letter might open with tender honorifics, praising loyalty or wisdom, but 2 lines later, a phrase might twist into something heavier, a reminder of the Sultan's expectations, or of the fate of those who disappointed him. Each sentence glimmered like a coin that, when flipped, revealed another face. Men of the court became obsessed, not with the literal words, but with the game of decoding. They studied tone, pauses, metaphors, anything that might expose the hidden truth. One day, the letter might feel like a blessing. The next, the very same words might be reread as a veiled threat. This constant uncertainty made the letters addictive. To receive one was like drawing a card from a deck you could not see. Would it bring favor, Would it signal disaster? The only way to know was to keep reading, to analyze, to obsess. Modern science has a name for this trap: variable rewards. The same mechanism that keeps gamblers at the table and keeps us refreshing our messages long after midnight. When the outcome is predictable, interest fades. But when each pull of the lever, each line of a letter might bring delight or despair, the brain cannot resist. Hurrem weaponized this long before psychologists gave it a name. By making every letter a gamble, she ensured that men leaned forward with pounding hearts, addicted not to certainty, but to the thrill of possibility. So there you sit, staring at her letter. The words praise you, but do they? The phrases reassure you, but perhaps mock you. You cannot know for sure. And that is the point. Hurrem turned language into a labyrinth, where every door opened onto two paths. By writing in double meanings, she forced the court into endless interpretation, endless anticipation, praise or condemnation, gift or blade. Each letter carried both, and in that uncertainty, the addiction took root, because nothing hooks the human mind more than the question, what does it really mean? Letters could travel where armies could not. The empire stretched from the Danube to the deserts of Arabia, from the gates of Vienna to the shores of the Black Sea. Armies took months to march its length. Caravans vanished into snow and sand. But a letter could slip past borders, cross rivers, find its way into the hands of men who mattered. And Hürrem Sultan sent them like arrows, loosed into every corner of Suleiman's world. Her words reached viziers who governed the empire's beating heart. They reached provincial governors on distant frontiers, where Ottoman banners snapped in winds that carried more rumor than news. They reached foreign courts like Poland's King Sigismund, who received a letter written in her graceful script, a gesture that blurred the boundary between queen consort and diplomat. Each message was a thread, weaving men into a web they could neither see in full nor easily escape. By the time they realized they were caught, they were already entangled. Ottoman politics had always rested on bloodlines and coin, kinship ties that demanded loyalty, bribes that purchased obedience. But Hurrem shifted the foundation. Her letters bound men in a different way. To receive one was to feel chosen, noticed, even essential. To be left out was to feel invisible, discarded, already falling from favor. Kinship could be broken, gold could be spent, but the memory of her choosing you, her handwriting on parchment addressed to your name, was a bond stronger than both. Men carried her letters like talismans, proof they belonged to her hidden circle. Here lies the deepest hook, the human hunger to belong. In the palace, survival meant being in the loop, and Hurrem's loop was the most dangerous and most coveted of all. If your rival boasted of receiving her words, you couldn't ignore it. You had to wonder, what was promised to him? What was whispered about me? Exclusion gnawed worse than insult. Men waited desperately, sleeplessly, for letters that might never arrive, haunted by the fear that silence meant exile. Hurrem didn't need to command loyalty. She made belonging itself addictive. So imagine again the empire sprawling across continents. Armies could conquer cities, but they could not bind men's hearts. Coin could buy service, but not devotion. Only Hurrem's letters could do that. Threads of ink that turned rivals into allies, governors into servants, and foreign kings into correspondents. Her network was invisible, yet unbreakable, stronger than blood, stronger than gold, built on the most powerful addiction of all, the desperate need to belong. And in the Ottoman court, to belong to Hurrem's circle was survival itself. Even silence was part of the performance. The letter lies unopened on the vizier's desk. Or perhaps no letter arrives at all. In the palace, both possibilities feel equally dangerous, because with Hürrem Sultan, silence was never emptiness. It was theater. A word from her hand could reshape alliances, but the absence of a word, that was its own kind of spectacle. The court leaned forward, waiting, restless, trying to guess what her silence meant. Hurrem had mastered the art of withholding. She knew that not every letter needed an answer. Sometimes the unanswered page screamed louder than a reply. A vizier might send petitions, gifts, assurances, and hear nothing. His rivals noticed. His allies noticed. Whispers began. Had he fallen from grace? Had he misstepped? In that silence, the court itself became the stage. Every man speculated, each rumor more dramatic than the last. Palace life turned into performance. A letter arriving was Act 1. The court watching who received it, that was Act 2. But Act 3, The most excruciating of all was the waiting. Would she respond? Would she remain silent? Ministers paced marble corridors, unable to concentrate on statecraft, their imaginations rehearsing possible endings like actors practicing scenes. And the audience, the rest of the court, watched every reaction, knowing their own futures were tangled in the outcome. This was more than politics. It was psychological theater, carefully staged. Hurrem wielded suspense like a dramatist, because she knew what modern science confirms. The brain craves closure. An unresolved story gnaws at us more than a finished one. It's why we binge-watch dramas into the night. Why cliffhangers haunt us until the next episode. Why a text left on read stings more than a harsh reply. The uncertainty is unbearable, and so we lean in, desperate for resolution that never quite comes. Hurrem kept the court hooked, not by satisfying their questions, but by leaving them hanging. So imagine again the unopened parchment, or worse, the empty desk where no letter ever comes. The silence itself becomes the message, louder than any words could be. The court waits, speculates, invents its own stories to fill the void. This was Hurrem's genius. Intrigue not only lived in what was written, but in what was withheld. Every silence was an act. Every delay was a performance. And in that theater, the audience, the most powerful men of the empire, were her captives. Because nothing is more addictive than suspense, and nothing more irresistible than a story that never ends. Steel rusts, ink lingers. The blades of janissaries dulled. The marble palaces cracked. Even Suleiman the Magnificent, conqueror of continents, lay buried beneath stone. Yet Hurrem's letters survived not as parchment, but as a pattern, a blueprint for power written not in blood, but in ink. Her whispers outlived armies. What began as private messages sealed and scarce, heavy with double meanings, grew into something larger than one woman. After Hurrem, letters became the chosen weapon of the women of the Hurrem. The Sultanate of women was built, not only on alliances and heirs, but on the quiet authority of written words. Hurrem showed that whispers could become systems, that correspondence could command armies without marching, and move gold without leaving a chest. The pen in her hand redrew the map of Ottoman politics more quietly and more enduringly than any sword. Later, valid sultans, mothers of emperors, followed her design. They wrote to viziers and governors. They maintained networks of influence, stretching from Cairo to Baghdad. They learned from Hurrem that writing didn't just communicate. It bound, it tested, it enthralled. Her ink was more than persuasion. It was precedent. Every woman who held power after her traced their steps along the lines she had already written. And here's where the story refuses to stay in the past, because the same loops that hooked the Ottoman court are still running in us. Scarcity, the rare message that makes us feel chosen. Secrecy, the DM that arrives unseen by others. Social proof, the gossip that spreads faster than fact. Variable reward, the text that could thrill or wound. Suspense, the silence that screams louder than any reply. These are the loops of intrigue. And centuries later, they hum inside our screens, our feeds, our notifications. We scroll, we refresh, we wait, addicted not to certainty, but to the possibility that the next message will change everything. Hurrem didn't invent the loop, but she mastered it. So as dawn breaks over Istanbul, tourists wander through Topkapi Palace, pausing in chambers where whispers once carried more weight than decrees. Few notice the ghosts of letters, the invisible ink that reshaped an empire. Steel has rusted, thrones have crumbled, but the pattern of intrigue, scarcity, secrecy, suspense still lingers in us. In every ping, every buzz, every message left unread. Hurrem's legacy is not only Ottoman, it is human, and that is why we cannot look away.